we're here. Oh, you know what? My camera is reversed. There's even
Hey,
after all that.
give me one quick second. I'm going to turn off my air conditioner so we can hear each
Okay.
other better. One
Oh,
second.
okay, good.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, great. I don't think anybody's on yet, but we will hang on for a little bit while people
Yeah,
join. If not, we'll just get on it, and then people can come join
yeah.
in.
It's let's
It's
see.
not 4 o'clock yet, so.
Right. So we can wait another minute. All right, we're doing this. That's good.
There's
Ah,
Claire.
so
Hi, Claire.
here we go.
Aw. Claire, man, we go way back. Chicago days. She lived in the area.
That's
Oh,
good.
wow. Cool. Well, yeah, we're gonna wait till 4. I just wanted to hop on a little earlier and get people on, and
I can't.
then we'll talk
I
about
can't believe.
boundaries.
I can't believe I figured this out. I'm such a. I told you earlier. I'm such a dinosaur when it
Same.
comes to when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm gonna have to really get one of my kids to sit down and give me a tutorial. You
Oh
know.
yeah.
So, but we're making do. We're
Yeah.
building the
Oh yeah.
parachute.
We're here. It's 4 o'clock, and we're
Yes.
on. So that's great.
There we go. All right.
Okay, so everyone, of course, you guys know that I'm Susana Rodriguez, and I just started this forum, Talkative Chick, which I'm so excited about. I've always wanted to kind of do an Instagram live type situation. And I know Mike Ortiz from high school days, and we were in the same geometry class. And my fondest memory of him was that we were paired together and kind of had to do word problems. And we were up on, doing these word problems, and he said, "Uh-oh, I'm up against the whiz kid." And I was like, somebody
Yeah.
thinks I'm smart in this classroom.
Yes. Yes. You
So
were. You were.
yeah,
I
it
had
was
to.
great.
I had to. I had to stay sharp, and I think you were a grade or two below
Yeah,
me. I think
yeah, I'm
so.
definitely way younger than
So
you are. Just kidding.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm younger for
So
sure.
you were you.
Um,
I had to.
yeah.
I had, and I still had to keep up.
Oh
So you were
yeah, I was one of these
definitely the
people that
whiz
just
kid.
loved math, loved math.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
then time went on. We kind of like went different ways after high school. I never really kept in contact with Mike too much. I kept in contact with his sister, and then we were at a birthday party or for her recently, and he was there, and we started talking, and we wanted to share some stuff on Instagram Live, and we thought it would be a good pair up. And he is now the Way of Growth on Instagram Live with a great handle name, and he wants to be a public speaker once the stages open back
Yes,
up, right?
yes,
Which is a great goal, and I think he has a lot of great information to share. And so today our first subject, we're talking about boundaries,
yes.
which is a huge subject that we'll try to cover in 30 minutes or less, which is going to be a
I
little
know.
taxing. But if
Challenge.
anything, we can always come back, right? We can come back for a
Yes.
second round of boundaries. And I wear my
Okay.
Bush shirt because of the bee. And so everybody knows I love music, and I'm tying those two in together. But so let's dive in to boundaries, right?
Yes. Yes.
So what, for people that haven't heard the term boundaries, I think a lot of people have, but just in case if they haven't, what are boundaries? What's a good definition of boundaries in relationships?
So if you're familiar, for example, with famous author Brene Brown, I've read many of her books, and she's got some really good stuff. She gives a very simple definition that I think is definitely, it's simple but to the point. And she basically says boundaries help you define what's okay and what's not okay in a relationship. Simple as that. Another way to look at it is they help define what's yours and what's not, or what is your responsibility and what
Mm,
isn't. Often blurry lines in those things can cause trouble in a relationship, and many of our problems in relationships come from that. From the not having clear lines. And so that's basically what I would say about what boundaries are. They help you define um, who you are and who you are not,
Yeah.
what your responsibilities are, what you need to take care of, and what you should not take care of and leave alone, you know? And so, and what's okay and what's not okay, you know? So that's, you know, the gist of it.
Yeah, that's good. I think, boundaries for me are like a protection, right? I mean, we don't need the wall up all the time, but it's kind of a wall that we can kind of bring into
Hmm.
different stages, bring in, bring out. And what happens when a person doesn't have any boundaries? Like they
Yeah.
just live their life without any boundaries.
You know,
What?
well, so you know, it's funny you said about the you know having protection. One of the best things you can do for your children, for example, if you have children, is to teach them, you know, what to say no to. If you grow up and you don't know how to say, you know what, no, I don't feel comfortable with that, you're in for a world of hurt, because unfortunately there's people, you know, the world is full of people that will take advantage of you if you let them, you know, and they'll go as far as you let them. um, and so you have to have a healthy sense, you know, of what, you know, of your boundaries. So what can happen, you know? Well, there, you know, in we discussed the book. There's a book called Boundaries. I have a copy of it right here, that I read a few years ago, and it started me on this journey because you know, unfortunately, I struggled with with the issue of boundaries, and often we get to a point in our adult life where um, we experience enough pain to realize this isn't working and I need to figure it out. Um, you know, you can call it a midlife crisis. You can call it whatever you want. And some people, you know, have it earlier than others. And some people never get to that point, and, you know, where they are willing to get serious about looking at issues in their life, unfortunately, and they just continue, you know, with you know, just surviving. So I got to a point. I was married for 20 years and ended up divorcing. Um, and to be honest with you, you know, part of the reason I was excited to do this is I heard someone say recently in an interview that part of our purpose in life is not only to connect with other people, but to go through our struggle and share how we got through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I have found that really digging into the issue of boundaries has helped me in many areas. Boundaries are really one of the big, huge keys to relationships, whether it's dating, in marriage, in child rearing, at the workplace, in an organization. You have to maintain a sense of self. Otherwise, you lose yourself. And that's the biggest tragedy of all, to go through life and um, never getting to a point where you can be yourself and be loved for who you are.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and or not loved for who you are. That's okay. You know, the key is getting to a point where you can be yourself. And so, you know, we're all individuals. You know, one of the things that I saw, you know, the opposite of not having boundaries, or I'm sorry, the opposite of having boundaries is, there's a term that psychologists refer to as enmeshment in relationships, or an enmeshed relationship. And so I started doing a little research the other day, you know, for our talk. I came across an article that said these are some of the signs. There's 5 signs they gave in the article. Some of the signs that you might be in an enmeshed relationship. Number 1, emotions become blurred and you find yourself confusing your emotions with the emotions of individuals you have a relationship with. Again, there's no boundary. So if someone's in a bad mood, you're in a bad mood
Yeah.
automatically.
How you
And
feel, whatever you're projecting on me, I'm taking it in.
yes. And that's a terrible way to live. We should have compassion and we should have empathy. But I should always maintain that sense of self in a relationship, otherwise it can become a very toxic type of relationship, you know, where the other person can basically pull your strings and push your buttons at their will, you know, and that's not healthy, and it's not the way it's meant to be. Number two, the cost of individuality seems high. Choosing freely or having different beliefs from the family or the partner, or in our case, growing up, our church system, frequently have negative and extreme outcomes in the relationship. So there's no room for individuality. If you're in a relationship like this, and you're starting to wake up to it, well, boundaries is something you want to explore and you want to, you know, dig into. Number three, there's a role for you to fill. As an adult, you continue to conform to your family or your close relationships, their wishes, and instead of creating your own choices or perspective. So again, there's never any room for you know, no, I like this instead. You know,
Right.
if you express that in a relationship and it's met with, you know, with negative, you know, aggressive, you know, an angry, you know, an angry person, then again, that's a sign, you know, boundaries are an issue. The other, you know, there's a couple other ones that are pretty, you know, I'll just give the last one. Usually it's up to you to make things better when conflict arises. You feel a compulsive anxiety to put your Superman or Superwoman cape on and fix the problem or fix it immediately. So again, it goes back to, you know, feeling responsible for the other person's mood, the other party's you know, attitude, or, you know, and so you all of a sudden you're taking on responsibility that you should not have on yourself, you know.
Right.
So again, an issue with boundaries. So basically there's four types of people that we tend to fall into, four groups of people that we can tend to fall into when our boundaries are out of whack. Okay, so I'll just give the four very quickly. The first one is, you know, we can become very compliant. Okay, I fell in that group. I grew up, you know, and let me just paraphrase this. With this, often, you know, and I'd say pretty much, you know, all the time, this is the case. We relate to others and we operate in life with the program that we were given from our family. That's how we learn to interact. That's how we learn to relate. Unfortunately, our parents, you know, none of our parents were perfect, and some were healthier than others. But, you know, you know, in pretty much all of our cases, you know, you talk to people and they can tell you, you know, my family had issues with this or that or the other. And you can get to a point where you know better, but if that's in your program, you're going to continue to perpetuate certain behavior and certain ways of relating. So often you hear the term, for example, codependency. You know, codependency is something that is often linked to, you know, you hear a lot of people that have background or say a history in the family of alcoholism or drug addiction, and things like that. And usually what happens is someone in the family, their needs are paramount, and there's no room for individuality. Everybody has to, well, no, we got to make sure they're okay. And so
talk about a place with no boundaries, right? When there's a toxic person there in the home that's pretty much limiting everybody else's space and everybody else's peace and everybody else's harmony.
Yes. So you learn to quickly kind of, you know, check out your needs go out the window, your thoughts, the basic emotional needs growing up are not met, are not even relevant, and so you become very compliant and you become a fixer. You become, and everything becomes about fixing the other person and making sure they're okay. Nothing wrong with nothing, with helping people, but that, it gets that's an extreme, so that's the compliant. The other,
you just go along with whatever is coming at you, and you go with whatever the storyline is. So
yes,
basically, yeah.
yes,
I can relate a little to that.
yes.
Well, I'm an extrovert by nature. Everybody knows that, of course. So I think my personality lends to bringing people in and to being talkative and everybody's welcome and, that type of, and that's great. But then I've learned the hard way to not, there's some people that you can only let in a little, or you have to kind of push it back because they are kind of taker overs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So yeah, compliance.
No. I think that's right. I think it's great for people to hear how these things look like in the real world.
Yeah, totally.
And so which leads to the next type of person, the next type of group of people, which are the controllers.
Yeah.
And there's different levels. There's people who do it in a passive, kind of sneaky way. There's emotional controllers. There's people who get very aggressive, controllers. So that's another group. And I'll tell you something about the dynamic between the compliant and the controller here in a minute. But the other two, we won't probably get into these very much, but the other two are the avoidant, who basically, an avoidant person just has a very difficult time asking for help or receiving help. And so they, the boundary issue there is that they have a wall up and they will not let anybody into their life. And so it becomes very, very difficult to have a relationship with someone like that. The non-responsive is very insensitive to others' needs and won't reach out and won't step in when the other person legitimately has a need, or a legitimate need and needs help. So now it's something funny about those. I was thumbing through the book Boundaries earlier, and I came across something that they wrote that was kind of funny. They in the chapter where they discuss this, they asked, do you know what happens when a rescuing, enabling person meets a controlling, insensitive person? And the answer is they usually get married. So it just creates
opposites attracting. Yeah.
Yes. And so the problem is, the problem is that both the controller and the compliant are almost kind of after the same thing. Brene Brown, in her books, she calls it they're hustling for worthiness and belonging. She describes people who are wholehearted as people who have a healthy sense of worthiness and of belonging. And so the compliant is doing what they're doing in order to have acceptance and have love. And so they say yes to everything. They become very helpful, but to the point where they lose themselves. And so they're not really being genuine. And you can't be loved for who you are if you're not willing to be transparent and be real. And a person who can never say no, and on the inside they're saying, "Oh, I hate this," but they don't. But they don't say it.
Right.
And
they can't. Yeah. It's not like they're going to say.
They just put a smile on and say, "Okay, yeah, that's fine." You're not doing yourself or the other person any favors. And so you're not being genuine. And what you're really after is true love, is true acceptance, is true belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll never get it unless you're willing to be genuine. And
Yeah.
that's part of the boundaries. With the controller, it's kind of the same thing. They're after that sense of worthiness. They want somebody to approve of them and to say, you know what, you're enough. You know, deep down inside, that's what we're all after. But the controller goes about getting that a different way. They learn that if they achieve enough, if they have enough status, if they make enough money, if they work hard enough, and people will look at them and say, wow, you're amazing, you know? And that those are, it's good to be ambitious and to seek to be successful. But if you're doing it simply because you do not feel deep down inside that you're if you're doing it to establish your self-worth because you don't feel like you're enough in the first place, then you're again putting up a persona that is not the real you. The real you has flaws. The real you has, you know, is human, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
To err is human, you know, and so
I think
unless
there's something too about the controller, like the controller can't really hear no. He doesn't want to hear, or that, or she, he or she. It can be either one, but they don't
yes,
want to hear no. They, you know, and the compliant, I think, says yes to everybody, right? And
yes,
that's where their boundary issues lies. And the controller doesn't want to hear no. They want their way. And it's interesting being around a controller because I think we've all experienced controllers, I'm sure. I think they're one of those of the four, they're one of those polarizing characteristics that you can pretty much see a mile away. You know, they kind of come in, they plummet everything, and they kind of feel like they are the ones that are going to take over and control whatever's going on, you know, and sometimes it can be family, a friend, it could be workplace, like you said, different instances. And so it's just interesting to see that. I think that one's the most apparent one of the four to me.
yes.
You know, but and how sometimes a compliant person can meet a controller and it can be just toxic.
There's a magnetism there. There's a chemistry between those two that initially there's a very strong attraction because they feed off of each other. Eventually, what can happen is, you know, eventually the compliant, not every time, but a lot of times, you know, starts saying, wait a minute, you know, but what about me, you know? And so you start waking up a little bit, and that's when the real work can begin in a relationship. Now, I will say this, coming from someone who, again, going through a divorce and everything, my advice to people that are not married and that are dating is establish boundaries early. Be yourself early, and don't be afraid to be genuine and to find out the truth. Truth is one of the biggest things when it comes to this conversation. You have to be truthful. You have to be honest.
And you have to get real with yourself, right? Because there's times that you meet people and there might be two or three things that you like about them, and there's two or three things, and I mean, we're getting off the subject of boundaries, but like it could be boundary because of boundaries, right? And I think you have to get real with yourself of like, okay, is this person really, you know, fitting my world or not? And am I fitting their world? And I think we've got about 8 minutes left. Anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. What's some helpful steps that we can do to put up boundaries if we haven't been? And I also want to touch on, because we were talking about training up your child. I thought that was a really good topic too, because we do have some moms on and parents, I'm sure will listen later. But I know growing up, sometimes like decisions were just so like made for me all the time, where, you know, this is what you're going to eat, this, and I mean, that's fine, but I think it's really important what you said about training a
As a,
child to
yeah,
say no, or to say, I'm not fine with that, or
yeah.
I don't, and so those are two good points that I
At
want
every
to.
at every stage at every stage from birth, you have at some point you have what people call the terrible twos, and you have a kid that all of a sudden develops a sense of autonomy, and it can be very challenging as a parent, because they all of a sudden they learn the word no.
Yeah.
Johnny, I need you to do this or other. No, and so as a parent, and they go through that again in the teenage years, and then they can go through that again in their 20s when they're, each stage that is a new stage coming up. Um, the key is this. What I would say to that is this very simply is I think one of the most helpful things you can do is allow choices and consequences whenever possible.
That's
So
good. I love that. I love the choices. Yeah. And
so
well, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'll tell you a quick story. I remember some years ago, my son wanted to go on a camping trip, and I hope he's not hearing this, but uh, he wanted to go on a camping trip, and he had just purchased a car. It was a used car, and he wanted to drive up to the Boundary Waters, which is near the Canada border,
Boundary
by
waters.
himself and go camping. And my initial thinking was, no, you don't. And then I thought, and then I backtracked and I said, okay, I said, that's fine. You want to do that, but there's places you can go camping that are more like, 2-3 hours away down near Brown County and near Indianapolis and stuff. I said, uh, you can do some great stuff there. You can choose, but if you go to the Canada border and something happens or your car breaks down, I can't help you. So you're on your own. If
Oh,
you
okay.
if you go to the other place, then
Yeah.
I can then something happens, I'm willing to go help you out. So you think about that, make your
Yeah.
decision, and then
Yeah.
and
That's
then
kind of
you
an eye opener, right?
and then you
Especially if
live
you
with
don't have
your
a reliable car,
right,
like that it's going to
right,
get you there and back.
right. Then
So
just
that's a boundary you even put with your own son. Like, this
yeah.
is the way
It's
things will
about
be.
choices and consequences. So
Mhm.
and they have to be age appropriate, of course. He was
Mhm.
like 18, 19 years old at the time.
Where he could go
You
do
don't you
anything he
don't
wanted
you
to.
don't let you wouldn't let a 9-year-old, you don't give that choice to a 10-year-old,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and then what I would say real quickly about what you said earlier about
Yeah.
what can you do
What can we
to
do to
take
put
steps.
boundaries?
So number one, I would say learn to start developing a healthy sense of self. So learn what your likes are and what they're not. Learn to if you're in a restaurant and and you order something and the waiter brings you the plate and it's not what you asked for, instead of just putting up with stuff, you don't have to yell, you don't have to scream, but
Right.
little by little start exercising that muscle and
Yeah.
say I'm sorry, this wasn't what I wanted, and you'll start to see yourself getting stronger in that area, to where in relationships you can voice your true feelings and be okay with it, and it's like a muscle. It gets
Yeah.
stronger the more you use it. So that
Yeah.
that's
So
that's one thing.
basically you learn to say no, or that type of thing. And sometimes it'll be met with friction, right? Some
Yes.
emotional things will pop up, especially with people that you've never said no to. You know,
Yes. Yes.
that
And that,
they might get upset or
yes.
sad
And
or angry or whatever. And I
yes.
think I think there's a fear, right, sometimes of saying no to somebody. I don't know what it is. I've had that before where I'm about to text a boundary and I like hem and haw, and then like I text it and then I'm like, like you have like this moment of like, oh no, how is this gonna go? And then when the person accepts it, you're like, oh, okay, great, awesome. But I don't know why, even as adults, sometimes we have that thing where we don't want to upset people, we don't want to rock the boat, we don't want to, ebb and flow, but they're needed to
But the
protect our.
longer
And I
the
think if
longer you
somebody
wait,
really cares and loves you and wants to be your friend, coworker, whatever it is, they're going to respect that. And I think if they don't, then are they really there for you in the long
yeah,
haul,
is
right?
that a relationship you want to continue? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why
yeah,
when you voice it early, then you save yourself a lot of grief in the future. And two words that are very important along the lines of what you just mentioned is grace and truth. You want to speak the truth with grace.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, you don't have to
So
be rude or mean about it. It doesn't have to
no,
be a war. I think another thing that you said was really good on one of our talks that we had, but about limiting exposure, right? Because there are sometimes people that are around us that we have no choice. Like sometimes family, I think of family, coworkers. We don't have a choice of a coworker. Bosses, sometimes we do. We can go to a different job if we want. But if we encounter a person so limiting exposure, I think you had said that one of the talks. I
yes,
thought was a
you
really good
can't.
point.
Yeah, because boundaries. It's important to remember. Boundaries is not about controlling other people's behavior. You can ask, and there's a difference. You can ask, would you please not do that? But they have a choice. They can
Oh,
keep doing it,
wow.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's fine. If they choose to continue hurtful behavior,
Yeah.
then what I do is I say, okay, I can't control you, but I'm gonna control what I let in
Yeah.
and what I allow
Mhm.
myself to be exposed to. And so you make the necessary changes there,
That's
So,
good. Yeah.
and then one very last thing
Mhm.
is if you are in a relationship where you've been in this kind of in a bad dynamic for
Yeah.
many years,
Yeah.
um, seek therapy, seek counseling if you think you need it, and then begin to allow the other person some time to adjust to the new you,
That's great. That's
and
a great
and
point.
say, listen,
Good
this is
idea.
and they may be receptive to it, and then you can
Mhm.
continue and reshape the relationship and come out
Mhm.
better.
Mhm.
Maybe sometimes they're not, and
Yeah.
then you have to make a decision whether or not that's a relationship you should continue or not.
That's great. That's a great ending point. I love that. I think it's great because, yeah, sometimes there just needs to be adjustments in a relationship, but
Mhm.
you can't change their behavior, but you can change how you approach your own life, right?
Yes.
So that concludes our sessions, 30 minutes. Somebody just said, can't we make this an hour long? 30 minutes is not long enough.
I know, I
I
know.
know. I feel like I could talk about this for 5 hours. I mean,
Well,
it's a really great subject. Thank you, Mike, for your time. Thank you for all of those that hopped on to listen to our chat. I'm going to try to put it on IGTV. I've never done that before, but we'll see how it goes. And Mike and I will be doing other talks in the future because I just love the subject matter. And thank you so much for your transparency too in your own life and what you've gone through. I admire that. And thank you all for joining. Until the next time. Bye.
thank you, Susie. Thank you.
Oh, thank
All
you,
right.
Mike. Bye.